performance of the Wild Zeep.
Wild Zeep's first performance. The Wild Zeep was starring in the local Zeep production of Romeo and Juliet. It was his first performance, but everyone was counting on him to make the play a hit. You see, the Wild Zeep was talented in many ways and had made quite a reputation for himself. Hilda Drampit, the stern director, took him backstage after every rehearsal to say,
"It's up to you, oh Wild Zeep, to make this play a smash."
So the Wild Zeep practiced his lines 23 hours every day for 23 days.
What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun.
As he dragged his sleepy Zeep body home, the neighborhood Zeeplings followed, tugging on his sleeves, begging for his autograph.
Can you sign this for my son, please?
Sign here.
My son loves you.
Soon you'll be one famous Wild Zeep,
cried little Morris Mills, as Sally Spottle, with a tiny 2-inch camera, snapped photo after photo of him. Trudge, trudge, trudge. 12 miles later, the Wild Zeep reached his extra soft ostrich feather bed with the cloud blossom pillows and had just begun to sip his favorite blackberry tea with lemon cream and honey when... It was the Wild Zeep's great Aunt Zelda, once removed, calling from Alaska to give him some practical advice. Of the 334 Zeeps with acting ability, Aunt Zelda was the top talent. Years ago, she had won fame and fortune through her act as a skydiver who saves a swan.
"Whatever are you doing, up, awake, and about, O Wild Zeep?"
Aunt Zelda scolded.
"As an actor soon to make a smash hit, sleep should be your main concern. Every excellent actor needs at least 12 hours of sleep. Dreams, too. Every good actor must have 2 zip-zinging dreams a day.
Aunt Zelda,
sighed the wild Zeep wearily.
I was just this split second going to sleep and...
Oh, Wild Zeep, please forgive me.
Interrupted Aunt Zelda earnestly.
If nothing else, I do know how important sleep is to the budding actor about to make a smash.
The wild Zeep had snoozed off and hung up the phone in his sleep. The next day, the wild Zeep leaped out of bed with far more zing and zip than he'd had in his life. Tonight would be his first performance.
I must say, a wild Zeep,
The wild Zeep said to himself after pouring hot chocolate in his oatmeal bowl and oatmeal in his strawberry juice glass.
if this is the life of a star, it is a strange life indeed.
Priscilla Putterlip poked her head in the wild Zeep's kitchen.
Ready to make a smash hit?
She sang out. The wild Zeep felt his neck prickle. His thumbs start twiddling and his head turn oddly heavy.
Excuse me, Priscilla,
The wild Zeep said politely.
but I must run.
And run did he ever. That wild Zeep hurled down the ruddy road from his house, sped up an avenue here, galloped down a street there, raced here, there, and everywhere. Thoughts of smash hits, fame, and fortune were scrambling up his brain.
Why, I can't remember my own lines.
Gasped the wild Zeep at mile 8. By mile 17, he'd remembered only one word in the third act. And at mile 20, the wild Zeep skidded to a stop, rested his heavy head on a large, cool white rock, and fell fast asleep.
Who can this be so sound asleep in the middle of the day? It looks like the much-mentioned Wild Zeep.
Two butterflies, Frida and Alfred, hovered above the wild Zeep in his heap.
Should we wake him?
Asked Frida.
I thought tonight was his great performance as Romeo.
Oh no, Romeo!
Groaned the wild Zeep, awakened by the sweet voices of butterflies.
Why oh no?
Asked Alfred curiously.
You're not looking forward to your smash hit performance? Smash hit this, smash hit that, and fiddle sweeps to all that splat. Oh, drat!
Cried the wild Zeep.
How can my performance this evening be a smash hit before it's performed? I've never acted in public. Everyone from Miss Trampet to the teeniest zeepling thinks that somehow I'm going to make this a smash hit. What? I can't remember my own lines. And talent? They talk about talent. I have no more talent than a spoon.
The wild Zeep was just not himself. His head felt heavier still.
Why, that's not true.
Cried Frida.
You just now delivered a very passionate speech.
Quite so.
Agreed Alfred, who knew a thing or two about acting and, in general, greatly appreciated the arts. This calmed the wild Zeep down a bit, and he asked the butterflies,
Can you wondrously winged folk give me some advice for my first performance?
Alfred and Frida looked at one another.
Well,
Said Alfred slowly.
just keep in mind that your act depends on what's inside the Wild Zeep and not what everyone out there expects or thinks of the Wild Zeep.
chimed in Frida.
Forget about everyone out there and listen to your insides.
She then flew over to Alfred and whispered something in his ear. Alfred nodded.
If only I had as much wisdom as you two. You remind me of my great-grandfather Zeep.
Said the wild Zeep respectfully as the three headed toward the theater. He continued.
Would you like some free tickets to...
But before he could finish his sentence, lo! Frida and Alfred had flown straight into his open mouth. The wild Zeep jumped 8 miles high and started laughing, giggling, and guffawing. Butterflies tickle mightily when first swallowed. From deep within the wild Zeep, the butterflies sang to him.
Don't worry about us.
Good luck in your performance, and we'll see you afterwards.
You have only half an hour before you must be on stage.
Hilda Drampet, the stern director, pulled at his ear, rumpled his hair, and started lecturing him on Romeo. But the wild Zeep heard none of her words. He was not himself. A crowd of Zeeplings hooted outside his dressing room. His friends and relatives chattered on and on about stardom. But the wild Zeep was very far away. He was no longer the wild Zeep. He was Romeo. As he strode on stage, the lines flowed from his lips effortlessly.
Quite good.
Excellent.
A superior acting job.
Hardly an act at all.
Everybody was much impressed, and soon the theater was absolutely quiet, except for the voices of the actors.
In pure gold, that while Verona by that name is known, there shall no figure at such rate be set as that of true and faithful Juliet.
Suddenly, Romeo was speaking his last words. There was a wild burst of applause, and the wild Zeep, in a daze, looked up to see the whole audience as one rise to praise his magnificent performance. He gasped with such force, Alfred and Frida flew right out of his mouth.
Congratulations!
They cried.
A splendid performance, and we had the best seats of all.
The wild Zeep said gratefully.
I could never have done it without you. I will always remember you. Take a bow.
So the three friends bowed and bowed and bowed till the sun rose the next morning. Compliments of the wild Zeep. They had starfruit pancakes and blackberry nectar for breakfast and slept well onto sunset. For both star actors and butterflies need their 12 hours of solid sleep. And nobody would have ever guessed the wild Zeep had butterflies in his stomach the evening of his first performance. The wild Zeep swallows a cloud. The morning the wild Zeep swallowed a cloud, his face turned gray, his hair white, and he rose high above the treetops and began sailing west.
I don't think I'm cut out for this.
He said unhappily as a bird flew through him.
My feet enjoyed the feel of the earth too much.
He was worried because he had been invited for dinner at Zeep's house and he didn't want to be late. Zema was a proud Zeep who cooked days in advance for special dinners, so it was especially important for the wild Zeep to be prompt. The wild Zeep couldn't steer the cloud he swallowed and wondered if it would ever land. He was not a wild Zeep with a fondness for heights, so when he swallowed the cloud, he felt a bit queasy. He drifted over to Tessie Turdig's house where he found her doing her 50 push-ups. She was a treblu bug who lived high in the bark of a wild sycamore tree, so needed to stay in shape.
50!
At 7,300 feet, sap beetles were plentiful, juicy, and sweet, perfect for an appetite such as hers.
Why, oh wild Zeep,
Cried Tessie as he hovered near her door.
you have become plump and gray, and I have never, ever known you to float through the air. Usually, you leap, hop, and skedaddle up my tree to visit me.
I know.
Said the wild Zeep unhappily.
It was my great misfortune to have swallowed a cloud early this morning. I don't know where I'm heading or when I'll land, and it's sure to be a dark day.
Well, I believe
Said Tessie practically.
the cloud in your belly is making you act and feel like a cloud, and affecting the mood of everyone around you.
True enough, when the wild Zeep looked down, he saw all the woodland creatures moping about, shuffling along, or getting into fights.
I guess I'd better go somewhere else.
He said miserably. Now, as you know, usually the wild Zeep was a light-hearted, skylarking creature skipping about, singing, or playing one of his 72 violins. He would offer freely his foolproof Zeep wisdom to any creature who needed it. And always around 4:30 in the afternoon, he would begin whipping up a delicious banana rhubarb crisp or some apple sop soup topped with orange rind and ginger butter for any friend who stopped by after dusk to chat. Most folks would find themselves grinning at the mere sight of the wild Zeep. There was no doubt that being a cloud was contrary to the nature of the wild Zeep. Tessie the treblu bug was beginning to feel a little testy, so she hastily bid farewell to the wild Zeep, who continued to wander in a westerly direction. He had a bad spell, caught in the afterdraft of a helicopter, where he spread so thin he nearly disappeared, coughing and spitting up the fumes. strange to be so light, and yet so somber, the wild Zeep thought to himself grimly.
A wild Zeep.
He said, for speaking out loud to himself had helped him through many a bad spot in his past.
What would great-grandfather Zeep do in a spot like this?
He recalled the story his great-grandfather told him about the time he'd been practicing goose and swan dives and was caught in the ferocious current of the Stormy-Kill River. Great-grandfather just let his Zeep body flow with the current till he wound up safely on shore a few hundred miles away from his home. He gritted his teeth till he realized clouds don't have teeth. He tried heading north, where most clouds belong, till he realized clouds are pushed along by wind. When no wind blew, the wild Zeep hunched up in the air, feeling sorry for himself, angry at the cloud which had lodged itself in his belly, and worried about missing Zema Zeep's dinner. The sorrier, angrier, and more worried he grew, the more like a cloud he grew. Other clouds began pushing toward him and bumped, bullied, shoved, rolled, and lumped, smack blam right into the wild Zeep.
Hey, Bob!
Cried the wild Zeep.
What do you think you're doing?
A mean, tough-looking cloud said. You talking to me? Another cloud jeered.
What kind of cloud are you, anyway?
All the clouds began pushing and shoving till the poor wild Zeep, well, he was fit to burst. And burst he did. Hurdy-gurdy, the wild Zeep split into a million raindrops and was falling, kerplop. Right down to earth in Zema's garden, where she was picking a few ripe plum tomatoes for her famous, specially fresh scarlet salad. This salad contained beets, tomatoes, radishes, rhubarb, apples, strawberries, rose petals, and other assorted fruits and vegetables. Zema, known for the calm way about her, looked with no surprise at the wild Zeep, who had landed amidst a bunch of cabbages.
Did you see that storm that just whipped through? That was a doozy. But you're looking thinner, wild Zeep.
Zema said concernedly, peering over her fancy spectacles. After giving him a peck on the cheek, she said,
Come on in for some creamy almond corn soup. That'll set you straight. Then we can exchange recipes and chat with my other guest this evening, Mr. Zeppelbrum.
Mr. Zeppelbrum was a lily farmer who lived right up the road. He was famous for his mighty appetite and was especially partial to Zema's creamy soups. He had only one fear in the world. He was a bit scared of heights, so he wore a large hat to avoid looking at the sky. So the evening went well, until dessert. At first, both guests declined her famous buttercream cloud cake, which looked and tasted just like a cloud.
What?
Exclaimed Zema.
No dessert? Unheard of in this house.
Mr. Zeppelbrum claimed to be absolutely stuffed to the chin, but the wild Zeep bravely took spoon in hand to try the delectable confection. For just a moment, the wild Zeep had a spell of dizziness. But this soon passed. Quite relieved to be still on solid earth, the wild Zeep praised their talented hostess by reciting his finest poetry in her honor.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Some poems rhyme, but this one doesn't.
Zemma Zeep was listening so intently, she polished off the whole buttercream cloud cake, and that night had wonderful dreams of flying between the stars. The Wild Zeep and the Other Thing. The Wild Zeep was eating dinner with his friend Slogarth the Snail. He liked creatures who were hearty eaters, and he himself never refused seconds. They were eating the Wild Zeep's famous celery stew, pickled beets, wild rice, a staple in every Wild Zeep's diet. And for dessert, his exquisite butternut squash pie with sarsaparilla syrup. Slogarth the Snail leaned back and loosened his orange belt. That was a feast to dream about for weeks, he exclaimed. The Wild Zeep said modestly,
Oh, it was nothing. I just threw this, that, and the other thing in a few pots and pans, and...
You know, said Slogarth suddenly, I've always wondered what the other thing was.
The other thing?
Asked the Wild Zeep with a puzzled look on his face. Yes, said Slogarth. This, that, and the other thing. Whatever is the other thing? The Wild Zeep, for the life of him, could not figure out what the other thing was. Soon, Slogarth, after thanking his host 17 times over, trailed his slow, silvery way back to his cozy home under a beanstalk. And the Wild Zeep. Well, the Wild Zeep did not sleep much that night. He tossed, turned, tumbled, twisted, and twiddled his thumbs till dawn. As soon as the sun rose, the Wild Zeep jumped out of bed with such oomph, he hit his head on the ceiling and hollered with such force, he woke his wise Aunt Tildy clear across town. Immediately, she sped over to the Wild Zeep's house.
Whatever is wrong with you?
cried Aunt Tildy.
You're never up at the first crack of dawn.
The wild Zeep said,
I have not slept a wink since thinking about the other thing.
What is the other thing?
asked the curious Aunt Tildy.
I have no idea just now, but I'll let you know in a week,
said the wild Zeep with determination. And off he skipped and flew and sailed for many days to hunt down the other thing. For, like all Zeeps, the wild Zeep would not sleep until he found answers to his questions about life. The wild Zeep poked through the luscious jungles, hunted in the hottest deserts, paddled through the bogged water of swamps, leaped from sand dune to iceberg till, at long last, on the shore of a little sea, he found the other thing. Now, the wild Zeep could not tell you exactly how he knew it was the other thing, except it was not this, and not that, and could only be the other thing. It looked like a falling star. It felt cool and smooth as a mirror, and it smelled like the roots of a dandelion just unearthed. So the wild Zeep put the other thing in his pocket, galloped furiously home on a speedy white horse named Winifred, and planted it in his celery garden. The wild Zeep had a mighty green thumb, so he knew what other things need in order to grow strong. He fed the other thing honeysuckle sap, shaded it with soft palms, and recited to it the most encouraging poetry.
Roses are red, violets are blue. I'll give the other thing anything. There's nothing I won't do.
The townfolk gathered around the talented wild Zeep and the other thing to watch him toil and the other thing bloom. Zachary Zeep, the guard of the local greenhouse, asked,
Who would have thought there was such a thing as the other thing?
Well, said Slogarth humbly, the notion sort of slipped out at supper time.
Yes,
Joined in Aunt Tildy.
and the notion continued till dawn.
They looked admiringly at the wild Zeep as the wild Zeep worked. He worked so hard, he went through 12 pairs of gardener's gloves and had a sore throat from reciting so much poetry. Soon, the other thing grew taller than all of them, and the wild Zeep propped a ladder against it for easy climbing. From each laden branch, a new thing bloomed rare, beautiful blooms, blossoms that looked like the antlers of an ancient wildebeest. Dew in a rainstorm. A syllable of sleep. An arrow as long as the world is round. A finch's wing. The the silvery scale of a fish, a soprano's highest note. The townfolk oohed and awed, applauded, then went home to drink mulberry sap and dream about answers to life. They'd been awake for days watching the wild Zeep at work and were content to see the other thing in full bloom. The wild Zeep still did not sleep. He smelled a magic in the blossoms of the other thing and would not rest till he examined it more closely and smelled its scents more deeply. That evening, the wild Zeep climbed the ladder, rung by rung, to the very top where the wing blossom grew. This was one of his favorites. No sooner did the blossom fall into his hand when a strange feeling passed through him. Suddenly, the earth dropped from beneath him. He felt lighter than he ever dreamed possible. His arms bent like wire hangers, his heart beat faster than his thoughts, and from his throat came an amazing music. The whole world seemed to rush at him. The velvet bunch and brush of treetops swooped by his keen eye. Every rustle in the grass far below him now made his blood race. Cried the wild Zeep.
I can't believe I'm flying!
Soon he was doing loop-de-loops, skating through air, plummeting, and lurching up again. There wasn't a more delighted wild Zeep in the whole universe. At the instant of dawn, he came to a halt and crashed back into the branches of the other thing.
What a wondrous flight that was!
Exclaimed the wind-shook wild Zeep to himself, pulling some feathers from his head. He examined the branches and the million different blossoms and thought excitedly about all the days to come.
Endless possibilities! Endless dreams!
He whispered, then crawled into his soft Zeep bed for sound sleep. The next day, the wild Zeep and Slogarth the snail were lunching on sweet asparagus and honey yam strudel. The wild Zeep excitedly told Slogarth all about his flight, while Slogarth, chomping on the delectable strudel, looked at him in disbelief. Nothing like what you've described could possibly happen, even though you are a wild Zeep and my dear friend.
You just wait and see!
Cried the wild Zeep. He skipped up his ladder to the tip-top of the other thing and plucked the first blossom his hand brushed against. It was the silvery scale of a fish. The wild Zeep closed his eyes dramatically, waiting for the strange sensation to pass through his body. After a few minutes, sense of not feeling a thing but the silvery scaled blossom limp in his hand, the wild Zeep opened his eyes again. He scratched his head, shrugged, then dove headfirst into a bird basin. Clunk!
Ouch!
He exclaimed. Meanwhile, Slowgarth was calmly eating leftover marigold pollen pie and watching the foolish actions of the wild Zeep. "I'm sorry," the snail finally sighed sympathetically, "but I must go now to visit my Uncle Hunch." And off he slid, leaving a silvery wake. The wild Zeep was disappointed he couldn't share his experience with Slowgarth, but, true to the wild Zeep he was, he didn't brew and stew or feel blue because of this. First, he picked the blossom resembling a soprano's highest note, closed his eyes, and waited. Nothing. He even tried singing a few bars, but all he heard was his own Zeep tenor. He looked at the many rare and colorful blossoms, but didn't have the heart to pick any more. The wild Zeep realized that the other thing had lost some of its magic for him. Late that night, the wild Zeep dreamed he was in a brook, darting and pausing, floating and skimming on feathery fin, looking to either side of it. He woke the following morning, sadly knowing his dream was just a dream and not the magical other thing. Gazing forlornly out his window, he sensed a shadow behind him. It was his wise Aunt Tildy. The wild Zeep offered her some tangerine lime juice, sat her down at the kitchen table, and told her all about his experiences with the other thing. Then he asked for her foolproof Zeep advice. Aunt Tildy said kindly,
I'm sorry, O wild Zeep. It appears to me you turned the other thing into something. And now it's a different thing altogether and has lost the magic of being the other thing. It's a plain old something. You will never fly the way you flew, nor swim like a fish, nor fall like a star.
The wild Zeep was very quiet after this, but true to his Zeepish nature, didn't stay that way for long. Instead, he raced to his garden, dragging Aunt Tildy along to show her an especially magnificent stalk in his celery garden.
Now, isn't this something?
He cried with a wink in his eye.
Just smell the sweet air coming from the blossoms of something.
The wild Zeep spun Aunt Tildy about till she was out of breath. Aunt Tildy laughed a hearty Zeep laugh and spent the rest of the afternoon helping the wild Zeep weed, water, and prune.
This whatchamacallit is really handy,
said Aunt Tildy to the wild Zeep, pointing to a gardening tool he'd never used before.
This what?
Cried the wild Zeep with a wild glint in his eye. Already, dreams of searching for the wild whatchamacallit were beginning to fill his head. ability, advice. Backstage. Aunt Tildy.